and welcome. My name is Jackie McKinney, and I'm co-chair of Hartford 2000, which is basically a coalition of all the neighborhoods in Hartford. We have 13 of them, and Hartford 2000 is the coalition of all 13 neighborhoods. So we work on issues that are more common to the city. And tonight we're very pleased to have this be a part of sponsoring this program. There's nothing more important to this city than our kids and educating our kids. So I'm really pleased to have had this program going. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Matt Poland, who's the head of the library and executive director, and then he in turn will introduce Dr. Narvaez.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Matt Poland. I'm the CEO of Hartford Public Library, and I welcome you here to the Center for Contemporary Culture for this important meeting tonight. I have the pleasure and the distinct honor of introducing our superintendent to you to begin this workshop discussion about the transition. For those of you who have met her, you will understand how this biography really describes her. She's a visionary and a creative leader, bringing 20 years of experience as an educator, from a teacher to a principal to a deputy superintendent, to her role here in Hartford Public Schools. She joined us as a result of an extensive national search, a search that was extremely important for the district to ensure that we had a leader who would move us forward to achieve the goals that we've set for ourselves as a city. Dr. Narvaez graduated from Pennsylvania State University with a Bachelor in Science in Elementary Education. She has a master's degree in school leadership, and she has a doctorate from the Harvard, that's a big distinction, Harvard Graduate School of Education. Not that Hartford isn't good, but Harvard is Harvard. We're very delighted to have Dr. Narvaez here tonight and in Hartford, because I think for those of you who have met her or heard her speak before, she said when she came here she wanted to hit the ground learning. And I think that was a great choice of a word, from hit the ground running. Sometimes when you hit the ground running, you just keep running. And learning is very difficult. But she said that in a very articulate way and said that she wanted to hit the ground learning, and she really has delivered on that process. Today she's here to share with us the findings of her transition report. And it's not an informational session alone. There will be some information shared with all of you, but there's also an interactive part where you will help her continue to refine this transition report by getting as much input as possible from all the stakeholders in Hartford. Will elevate the chances for success in the long run. So that's why Dr. Narvaez partnered with Hartford 2000, the library, and the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. This is a first in a series of workshops across the city, and there'll be many other meetings where Dr. Narvaez will speak about this transition and ask for all of your help as she leads us forward in the 21st century. So I am delighted personally and also on behalf of the library to introduce Dr. Beth Narvaez.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you for being here. It's great to see so many of you here tonight. Thank you for taking the time to be with me. And I also want to acknowledge our great sponsors and partners tonight, Hartford 2000, the Hartford Public Library. Matt knows this is one of my favorite spots in the city. And they're just a great, great partner to us in the Hartford Public Schools. And Matt has been a great supporter of me personally and professionally. I want to acknowledge his role as a great partner, as well as a board member. The Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, of course, is very, very generous to us in the Hartford Public Schools. So thank you to all the sponsors for making this event happen tonight. I also want to acknowledge members of my team who are here. As Matt said, there will be some information given and shared, but also this is an interactive session. So we're going to have some facilitated discussions, and I just want to acknowledge the facilitators that are in the room. So if you could raise your hand so I can see where you are in the room and acknowledge you. And I want to make sure that there are facilitators in every group. Does every circle have at least one facilitator? It looks like we're pretty well covered. Great. Well, I want to thank you for being here and for helping us to have this conversation this evening. And I also want to acknowledge the good work that you do every day on behalf of the children in the Hartford Public Schools. So let's get into this. So here's the agenda for. I'll keep it to 15 minutes, I think. I'm going to share with you the findings of our transition report to give you an overview of what I have learned so far, as I have hit the ground learning, and I have learned so much in the past 4 months here in Hartford. So I want to share with you what my team and I learned that contributed to the production of this report. And then we're going to ask you to react and talk about the findings in your small groups, and then we'll do a share out because this is a continuous part of us planning together for the future of our school system and the future of our students. And then I'll close it out for tonight. So that's the plan. So when I started in July, I engaged a transition team to help me understand the strengths of our school system, to help me understand the persistent challenges that we face, and to make some recommendations about how we take our school district to the next level of success. And I asked them to study these aspects of the school system. First, teaching and learning. That's our core business. That's what we're here for. I asked them to take a look at our organizational culture and leadership because I strongly believe that leadership matters and leaders create the conditions for all of the people throughout our school system, adults and children alike, to do their best work. I asked them to take a look at operational effectiveness and efficiency because if our operations aren't running smoothly, we can't attend to our core business of teaching and learning as we should. I also asked them to take a look at 2 areas that were particular to Hartford that I heard a lot about through my public interview process that Matt alluded to when he introduced me. I asked them to take a look at equity and excellence. I asked them to review our choice process and to take a look at the experiences of our English language learners and our students with special needs. And last, I asked them to take a look at family and community engagement, and within all of these areas to point out and highlight our strengths, and then showcase what needs we need to face and address moving forward. So in the report, it's very comprehensive. I asked the team, I said, please team, don't give me 50 recommendations, and so they gave me close to 100. But that's okay. We're not going to implement every single recommendation, but they gave us a lot to consider. And the work that you'll do with us here tonight will help us to make sense of the findings and recommendations in the report and help us to decide which are the highest leverage strategies that we can implement to move our school system forward. Focus is an incredibly important component in school and school district improvement. So we're going to have to make sense of this and choose a few of the key recommendations to implement. But I want to share with you tonight from the very comprehensive report, which we have copies. You can take home and read it cover to cover. You can read all of the findings in each of the 5 areas I just highlighted. But what I want to do for you tonight is highlight the cross-cutting themes. These are the things that we heard across many, many conversations with many of our stakeholders. So it's almost no matter what group you spoke with or who you talked to, you heard these themes come up in the conversations. And as part of the transition team process, I neglected to tell you that we engaged around 1,700 people. More than 1,000 responded to a survey we put out there, and then we met, my team and I, with individuals, with small focus groups, with large groups of parents, of community members, elected officials, our students, our teachers, our central office staff. We went with people all across our community to help us understand what's on their minds about Hartford Public Schools. So these are the 6 themes that emerged across all of those groups. First, and this I call the overarching theme of the cross-cutting themes. This is a near universal aspiration, a shared commitment to educational equity and excellence. What we heard across our community was it is our community's hope and vision that no matter where you go to school in Hartford, a child will have an outstanding educational experience, no matter where you go to school. They also spoke of the need to eliminate variability of access, opportunities, and outcomes. So while it's a near universal aspiration that we have equity and excellence and a high-quality educational experience for every single child in every single school, our community told us that that's not our current state. There are currently not equitable access, opportunities, and outcomes for all of our children. And as Larry Leverett, who was the head of my transition team, says frequently, all means all. This second theme goes hand in hand with the first theme, and that with wanting equity and excellence across our system, there's a real urgency to attend to performance in neighborhood schools, but also to attend to overall performance of our students across the system. So while we tend to see disparities in performance with magnet and neighborhood schools tending to outperform the neighborhood schools, we also see variability of performance and gaps in performance within magnet schools between our suburban students and our Hartford residents. So there's a push to address that variability of performance both across schools and within schools. We do see in our neighborhood schools higher rates of chronic absenteeism, higher rates of suspension, and disproportionate numbers of our English language learners and our students with special needs, with only 11% of our English language learners attending magnet schools and only 29% of our students with special needs attending magnet schools. So the transition team is encouraging us to look at our choice process and look at how, are there issues of access? Why is this the case? Why do we have such few numbers of our English language learners and students with special needs in our magnet schools? And also, there is an encouragement and a real push, a real urgency, a sense of urgency to make sure we're attending to our schools with the greatest needs and that we're differentiating our support so we give more, we give differently to schools that need it the most. Those 2 themes really sum up what our community hopes for. The next 4 themes talk about how we'll get there, what we need to do to make those hopes and dreams a reality for all of our children. So the team found that our community desires meaningful engagement, effective communication, and relationships. And this we heard again across all of our stakeholders. We heard it internally. When I spoke with many focus groups of our internal staff, they said to me over and over again, you know, we have great people here, but we don't always feel valued and heard. We're here, we want to do more, but we need to be engaged in meaningful ways. I also heard that out in the community with our many tremendous partners that support us in the Hartford Public Schools. They say, we stand ready, but we need to communicate you to communicate with us in better ways, and we need to be more meaningfully engaged if we're going to gain more traction and accelerate progress of our students. And the next themes really call out the fact that there's a role for everybody in this work. I've used the term equity warrior, another Larry Leverett-ism. And when he coined that term, he talked about the fact that it takes everybody if we're going to achieve equity for our students. There is a role for everybody to play. We need to share our leadership and share in our efforts if we're going to achieve our reality of an equitable and excellent school system. So the next themes call out the role for everybody, starting with central office. And they talk about central office transformation, and that's really about shoring up the partnerships that exist between central office and schools. And that's important because we need to support our school-based leaders. You can't have a great school without a great principal. And so it's our obligation in central office to make sure that we are supporting principals, that we're making their job possible, and that we're helping them to focus on the things that matter most for improving instruction for our kids. And you see it kind of cascades. If we provide support for our principals to hone their leadership skills, they in turn create the conditions for our teachers to continuously learn and do their best work, so that teachers then create those conditions for our kids and we can get better outcomes for our students. They highlighted that the role of a portfolio director, it's kind of a confusing term, not everybody knows what that role means. It's just a principal supervisor. Those are the people on our team that supervise our principals. A central part of their supervision is that professional growth and development. They exist to help make principals be the best leaders they can be. And so that was called out as a strength in our system, the fact that we have that position and we have people dedicated to supporting our leaders in our schools. And we also have support teams that work with those portfolio directors that, again, help match resources in the central office to the unique strengths and needs of each of our schools. There was a call, though, to make sure that we coordinate our efforts across central office and that we make sure we're not working in silos. That tends to happen in central offices. In my previous districts, I saw that as well. And so the team is pushing us, break down those silos, make sure you're working in a concerted effort. You exist to serve schools, support principals, students, teachers, and families. And then there's a call for a need to have more focus, clarity, and alignment across the system as well. Next, we talk about professional learning and development of our entire staff. In a school system, the majority of your budget, 70%, goes to people. So we invest a lot in our people, in our budget. We need to continue to invest in their professional growth and learning. And so that's what this theme calls out. And that we need to create the conditions for people to do their best work. Again, we heard that time and time again when we spoke with staff, that they want to be deeply engaged in the work, but they didn't find enough meaningful opportunities for them to grow and develop in their work. They also talk about in the report the need to take this opportunity now as we're transitioning our accountability system in the state and the nation to broaden it, to make it more holistic, to use multiple measures to understand what I call the story of a school. And so now's the time to do that so that we can pinpoint the exact strengths and needs of each school and make sure we tailor our support to those unique strengths and needs so we can appropriately differentiate what we offer to our schools. And then last but not least, leveraging governance structures to strengthen citywide collaboration and commitment, a fancy way of saying it takes a village to raise a child. So there was a personal call out to my role as the superintendent and the importance of having a strong partnership with the board and the mayor to make sure that we are a high-performing governance team. And in fact, I'm really proud of the work that we've already started with the Board of Education to attend to how we will work together to attend to explicit agreements around communication, and to commit to becoming a high-performing governance team. And they said that, it starts here. We need to have that strong partnership with us if we're going to implement some of the harder to do recommendations that you see in the report, and that our strong partnership can help catalyze all the use of the amazing resources that we have in this city. So those were the 6 themes. You're part of the engagement effort that I committed to. In fact, at every session, I would ask people, what advice do you have for me as the superintendent so that I can be successful leading this system? And every time I heard people say to me, continue to listen, continue to engage with us, continue to learn. And so I'm continuing it with you tonight. So we launched the entry plan, listened to 1,700 stakeholders. We're doing a series of sessions now to get people's reaction to the transition report. And then we'll use the information that you gave us to start to frame out a strategic plan so that we can provide that focus and coherence and alignment and strategic direction to our system in the future. And so it's a way to keep the conversation going and to keep those who know the work the best, who know our city the best, who know our children the best, deeply engaged in this work. You can get the transition report online. And I think we have copies for you tonight, but if you need an electronic version. So I've talked at you, I don't know how long. I don't know if I kept to my 15 minutes. I hope pretty close. But now it's your turn to talk. We're going to work in facilitated groups. You saw that there are facilitators in each circle. I'm going to go over some of the norms that we have so that we can have a productive conversation. And again, I just want to thank you in advance for being here tonight and for being willing to participate in this important conversation. So just some things that we ask so that the conversation is fruitful for everyone. Cell phones have become a pretty normal norm. So we ask if you have to take a call that you take it outside. I want to explain the second one. We call this the buffet line rule. Make sure everybody in your circle group has had the chance to speak once before you go back for seconds. So it's kind of like when you're in a buffet and you fill your plate. Don't go back for seconds until everyone had a chance to at least have a first helping. So we ask that you just are mindful of that and you give everybody a chance to contribute and that we hear all voices in the conversation. We certainly encourage opposing and diverse viewpoints, absolute strength of our city and our school system. We so value our diversity, and so we want to honor all of the opinions and views that are expressed here tonight. Of course, we ask you to be positive and respectful and to assume that everyone has positive intentions in the conversation. So this is how we like to, I'm going back into teacher mode. This is how we like to facilitate. I work with my leadership team and how we like to make sure that we put out explicit expectations and norms so that we can have the most productive conversation possible. So I'm going to hand it over to you in just a minute. We have a few questions that we'd like to ask you tonight about the transition report. First, just what made the greatest impression on you? Kind of what's resonating with you? Any surprises? Second, did we miss anything? It's pretty comprehensive, but there could be something on your mind that we didn't catch in the report. Is there something that we should have reflected here? And then last, how should we prioritize all of this information? What should we focus on? And what are the implications for your partnership with the school system? So we're going to take those questions in 3 chunks. And with that, enjoy and thank you. And we'll report out in 20 minutes and hear what you had to say. All right, everyone. Time to wrap up your final thoughts. I hate to interrupt. I was listening in, and there was some rich conversation going on out there. So thank you for that. We're going to spend just a couple of minutes doing a share out. We've asked our facilitators to share 2 key ideas. I know it's going to be hard because there was lots of good talk going on, and I'm sure lots of great ideas shared tonight. But we're going to ask our facilitators to keep it to 2 key ideas that were shared in the conversation so that we can all hear what the conversation sounded like across the room tonight. So who wants to volunteer? Which facilitator will kick off first? Kevin. We have mics coming to you.
I'll be very brief. It was an outstanding group over here. And the 2 issues that they really brought up, one was equity. Equity was probably redundant around here, but I think for very sound reasons. Magnet, non-magnet, and as such, special education, ELL, but a very vibrant conversation regarding getting equity back into our schools. Second, safety and security of schools. Really engaging parents to be a part of that process, but making sure that our schools are safe and create positive learning environments for all our students.
Thank you. Way to start us off, Kevin. Thank you. Scott, next.
Okay, so we had a great conversation, and the group felt very strongly and came to consensus on one big key idea, and it revolved around equity. But it was really something that they felt in some ways was missing from the report. And it's an equity piece in which there's the idea of, are there pros and cons between having a lot of small schools, so 50 small schools, versus having more larger schools and then less number of schools? And one of the points was that when you have a lot of small schools, you have a funding mechanism for more principals or more administration. And then what comes out of that is sometimes there's not enough funds to service the social emotional needs of the child, to develop the teachers the way you would like, to have possibly more social workers or school psychologists. So it was for the music and the arts. And so it was an equity issue that the group wanted to raise.
Narvaez, and how much we appreciate your openness, your willingness to listen, and your clear vision, and really leading our district from the top down and modeling the kind of excellence that we want in all of our schools. So we had a very clear discussion about that. And then, of course, we too talked about equity and excellence and access for all children. All means all. And we particularly focused on our ELLs and our special education students and ensuring that they have equal access to all of the opportunities that all children have.
The one who's holding the mic. The major issues that we discussed were, I reflect what you've heard already. Equity was the overwhelming concern in this group, and there was a lot of gratitude for the fact that it's being acknowledged, that it's out of the box, it's being looked at openly, and maybe we can start to do something about it, because it's been, many people in this group felt it's been obvious for a long time, and that it's not changing. Another concern was the fact that some of our lowest performing schools are simply reflecting the social environments they exist in, the problems that the kids have, the poverty, and that they were very happy to hear that those schools will be targeted for greater supports because they need it so badly, including smaller classes, the best teachers, all the supports that we can direct into those schools. And there was finally, I was urged to include this because there was a concern that underneath all these things, there is institutional racism and classism, and that it needs to be looked at openly, not only in Hartford, but of course around the country, but we're here, and we can look at it here.
So I had a stellar group. Everyone's saying that tonight, but I really did because I had 2 students. So I want to thank Misael and Alex for contributing to fully to the conversation. Thank you, guys. So our group really spent a lot of time on talking about some of the surprises. The surprises were that honesty was so important. Just honestly putting out the challenges that we have in the district and recognizing kind of where we are. So everything from equity and everything that has been said. But this group, we spent a lot of time focusing on what happens with families who have dual identified students, ELL and SPED, and the differences that occur that point to equity challenges. And then we also talked a little bit about parent engagement and how parents advocating for their children and really being their child's case manager is a way of real parent engagement in our district. And that seemed a little absent from the report. And then I think from our students, what was wonderful to hear was that both Misael and Alex could really name who were the teachers that made the difference for them. They could tell me specific names, which I'm putting in here, and why, and what did they do, and for parents, how that interaction went. So I think that was a really great contribution from our team. Thank you.
Hello. One of the pieces that we discussed is equity. That was a biggie. But one of the things that our group also talked about is feeling valued. The engagement in our schools, most of our parents don't feel welcome. And if they don't feel welcome in our schools, how our students are feeling in that environment as well. That was one of the pieces. And also one of the parents visiting our schools. It's important that you see what they see when they go into those doors every single morning. The opportunities to have volunteering in the schools. They feel like some schools just shut them out. And it's really, they don't feel comfortable going into the school. They want to help the students feel engaged and want to motivate the students to go into the schools, but they don't feel that schools are supporting them so they can push their kids to go to school every single day. And transportation was also an issue. Maybe they might look into that as well. They didn't see that. It was mentioned too much, but looking at the distance of the children and the way they walk and all that was also mentioned. Suggestions as well. Parents they're here to help. They're here to support, and they're just still waiting for that opportunity to say, hey, come over and help out. And that's one of the things that we discuss in our group.
We had 2 common themes. I think it's mostly across the board. The first one was choice. It opened up a lot of conversation about the choice process and how parents felt that they didn't have clear pathways for their students and their education. That they felt that every year they had to kind of feel like they were rolling the dice. What school was their child going to get selected to? Also looking at the theme model, and is there any data that supports that theme schools are producing better academic achievement outcomes than non-theme schools, and where is that coming from? So that was one of the big things that we talked about. I hope I'm covering it for my team because I have a very knowledgeable team here, so I'll step up to the challenge here. And the other one was equity, not just equity of the money, but also with talent. There was a talk about looking at schools that not only for the equity for the money, but the talent. Where are the aspiring teachers are coming, and how are we supporting the talent in the district and encouraging them to retain in the district? So equity in regards to talent and money, and the choice process was the biggest heated discussion because a lot of the parents felt like a lot of choice was taken away from them in the process.
Good evening. I had a great group too. It was very diverse. We had parents and Hartford residents and community leaders and a colleague. So their perspective was quite broad. We started and ended with the comment that all students deserve a good school, and at the very end, one of our participants said, all means all. In between, though, we talked about a lot of the challenges that we confront as a community and as a district. And the big one that came up very early was concerns about violence and safety and the relationship to absenteeism and suspension. We also talked about culture in our schools and the need for better communication and the elimination of silos, especially in our large schools where there are academies, different schools within a school, and that is really important and probably might even relate to safety and violence issues. And then we became very positive and said we need to create a culture of affirmation for our students, have high expectations for each and every student, and instill pride in those students. Teachers and students affirming each other and engaging parents and families to be a part of the school and be involved in the education. As we were talking about this, another theme that kept coming up is what can we learn from magnet schools? That in fact we have some of the answers right here within our own community. And how do we figure that out? Another important piece that this group mentioned was the importance of engaging communities. They talked about community schools as an example of that. It's not always about money. It's about looking around at the resources that exist here.
One of the themes that came up with us was central office. That came up across a couple of the questions, and just the group was surprised that it was even part of the plan, that it was being looked at, and feeling like historically it was very separate from the schools, and then even separate within itself at central office. So, and the idea that it exists to support schools. So that was that kept coming up. And the other one was the confusion for parents regarding the whole choice process, registering once they've gotten into a school. Where do they register at the choice office? Do they register at the school? Do they, sometimes parents feel like they're running around from place to place before they figure out where they're supposed to be. And then what about the parents who are either illiterate or non-English speakers who don't read, so they feel that there's a difficulty with accessing the system as a whole and needing help, and how do they help their children? So those were our two biggies.
Okay, great. Our team talked a lot about equity, but from the standpoint of the process, a lot of our members of our team felt that their voice was not heard. And how do we reach out more to our families and students in the community to make sure that their voices are heard? A suggestion was talked about possibly having a parent advisory superintendent council. So how can we as parents in this community have our voices heard? How can our students' voices be heard? So we really spent a lot of time talking about the process. And so how did we do before? Was there a report card on our process before? And now the new transition plan is here. And the parents around this group and community members want to have their voices heard. And we talked a lot about that and how can we reach them. All right? Who's next?
Hello? All right. So like they say, they save the best for... There we go. So because we are last, we do have three. So the first one is across the group, everyone agreed that more time is needed to digest this report, and then they could give more informed feedback. So they're looking forward to having another time to address the questions that were given today. And then the two areas that we talked about mainly was, first of all, expanding on the village concept, really looking at the partnerships with families and the after-school programs, and supporting families before students even walk through the doors of the schools for pre-K or kindergarten, and helping them with educating their children. Also about equity, and we too hit on much of what the rest of the group say, about all students have access to quality teachers, resources, materials, sports came up, the lottery system, and quality after-school programs that address both the social emotional needs of the students as well as academic. So, did I forget anything? All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to just close us out here as I began with a huge thank you. Thank you for being here tonight and for being so thoughtful and honest and open in your responses. This is helping us to set a new strategic direction for the Hartford Public Schools. And so I heard, as I was listening in, I heard people saying, what's the timeline? You know, what are the benchmarks? How are we going to measure success? And so you saw that I'm going to be on the road with this, doing forums like this for the next several weeks. And then we hope to come out in the winter in January, February, March, and really pull together a strategic plan so that by the end of this school year, we will have put together a plan that lists out bold goals and key strategies to taking us to the next level of success. So I thank you, those of you who participated in the first series of conversations that led to the development of the report. I want to thank those of you who decided to join the conversation tonight, and I encourage you to keep coming back, to keep engaging with us, hopefully in meaningful ways, because your input really matters to us. So thank you again for being here and for sharing your great thinking. And we call this, it was interesting to hear your reflections, and I think the biggest reaction to the report has been, there really aren't surprises here, but we're glad that it's out there. It's a common understanding now. We're saying this is the story of us, who we are at this point in time as a community, and we're using that to create the story of now and to create urgency to act because that's what our kids deserve. And I was asked to remind you to give us some feedback. What was your experience tonight? So if you would take a moment to fill this out and let us know how tonight went, we would really appreciate it. So just thank you so much again.